What's poppin' with the population? It's another episode of Durag with the Cape Road. It's your host, me. This is episode, if you've been watching them, you know what number it is, because I sure as hell don't. Uh, if you like the content that I've been dropping, I appreciate, you know, you leave a like, you comment, subscribe, send to your friends and share. And if you really like it, or if you really like me, I'll leave my Venmo at the bottom. I'll leave my Cash App right here. And if you have my actual phone number, you can just send me something via Apple Cash. It's whatever. I mean, I ain't begging. Just saying. I do plan on like creating a Patreon or like trying to get into more long form content, but I've been looking at other platforms to do it on because I've heard that YouTube isn't the greatest place to do it on because of all the monies that they take away from you through whatever they do with their services. But that's enough of that finance stuff. We are in February. We're about to be at the end of February. This is Black History Month, aka for me, I call it History Month because my blackness is a part of America, part of this corporation that is called America. But this month, I think, was originally called like Negro History Month, and then it became Black History Month. And if I'm not mistaken, the reason it is in February, which is the shortest month of the year, but I think Abraham Lincoln was born in this month, and as well as Frederick Douglass. And you know, Abraham Lincoln is like touted for the Emancipation Proclamation and whatnot, and you know, being assassinated. I mean, he's not touted for that, but that happened to him. But people tend to romanticize the history of Abraham Lincoln because although the Emancipation Proclamation was during his presidency and because of his administration or whatnot, people forget that he wasn't really fond of black folk. I mean, there's literature. You can look it up yourself. I'm not just making this up. But I think we tend to romanticize history too much to the point that we are losing out on a lot of layered history, which we can have actual conversation where we can build upon the conversation to be able to move forward as a people with the whole scope of the history. I mean, we would rather have Abraham Lincoln be a vampire or werewolf or whatever the hell they made a movie of him about than have you know that he didn't really like black people, although he did sign the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed in 1863, and people didn't really, by people I mean the slavers, the slave masters, didn't really tell the enslaved Africans that they were free until about like 1865. That's where you have like Juneteenth. I think that was like June 15th, 1865. But 2 years later, that's when a lot more people figured out like, oh, we don't gotta be slaves no more. That's crazy that you didn't tell me, Craig or Richard. Let's go with Richard. I feel like there was a slave master named Richard. But yeah, romanticizing history is not fair to anybody because what you're doing is you are causing a chain reaction that will end poorly. How this chain reaction ends poorly is because if you are not allowing somebody to figure out what happened before, all you're doing is allowing them to do what happened before, knowing that that result will be possibly worse than what happened before. You get what I'm saying? Message. So a great example is, for instance, the pandemic. I mean, COVID is still a thing, but it's not as detrimental to global health as it once was, in regards because we have more treatments and vaccines or whatnot, what have you. But the whole scare of COVID-19, the rhetoric of like the racist rhetoric of like the China flu, the paranoia, the distrust in the government, the xenophobia, and all that stuff, all that kind of reaction to COVID was literally the same reactions people had to the Spanish flu, even down to the racist rhetoric. So like they only called it the Spanish flu because they thought it was from Spain. It's just like when Donald Trump was saying China, like it's the China flu.
Okay, why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China.
Like, they used Spanish flu as a derogatory term, so to speak. But there was all the things, all the top things that were involved in like the propaganda or just the freaking out of COVID was a part of the Spanish flu. There was like news articles that were like, yo, if you buy this product, you'll be able to get over COVID because this does that and this is not. I mean, sorry, not COVID. Get over the Spanish flu because this does that and that and that. And we had the same thing with like what Evernothing or Clorox bleach or whatever the hell Trump was talking about to clean your blood. And supposedly somebody actually did one of the things he suggested and lost their life, which is hilarious. It's not hilarious that the person died. It is hilarious that we as humans are capable of anything. Like, we can do great things, like figure out cures for diseases, and we can also do insanely, let me not say insane, I feel like that's kind of ableist. We can also do ridiculous things like use bleach or whatever product that person used and lose our life over it.
And I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous...
We need to be able to talk history and teach history in the full scope, because if you don't, then it's revisionist history. Then you have like conservatives or whatnot invoking the name of Dr. King during this month and only using the I Have a Dream speech and misrepresenting him as if he wasn't a radical in the later years of his life before his subsequent assassination, because he wasn't on that kumbaya, everybody hold hands. He was on that, oh, we got to end classism. Racism is a part of classism. We got to end classism, and capitalism is killing us all. And this imperialism and colonialism is really bad, especially, I mean, the greatest example at his time was the Vietnam War. But according to the way that he's portrayed in the media now, he's just like this lovable black man who said, don't judge people by their skin color or whatever, judge them by their character. And it's like Dr. King was way more complex than that. But again, that comes with revisionist history. That comes with the fact that you have these politicians constantly pushing to roll back things like history textbooks and stuff like that and talk about CRT, when in fact, like, that is a subject that's, if I'm not mistaken, it's taught in like college. And then like, yeah, that's not elementary school. And don't get me wrong, there may be some elementary schools or high schools that delve into that, but CRT in and of itself is just teaching the full scope of history. Because you can't teach history without telling the full truth. Because you can't deify or make people into heroes, because that's not fair to anybody. That's kind of why, if you see it in the media, as far as like films and movies and stuff, they tend to like, well, we as a people, we tend to attach ourselves to like these superheroes and all these other things, because they're like infallible. They're like the greatest thing. Is like this is the good and this is the evil, and there's nothing wrong with the good and there's everything wrong with the evil. And that's not how things work within society, within humans, because people are complex. So an easy example for you who don't understand critical race theory, when I'm saying a black lawyer what created that, or black intellectual, I forgot. I have a book on it, like the book that the guy initially made, but I haven't read it yet. But the easiest way to understand CRT is like, for instance, Africans in America fought in World War One, like after they didn't really want them to fight in World War One. That right there, boom, CRT. Like Africans in America, black folk, fought in World War One. The U.S. government, because of racist practices and like bylaws and like literal literal rules, were banning black people from fighting in World War One in certain respects. That boom, CRT. That's it right there. That's the whole scope. That's you understanding like, oh, this war was about like, you know, it was a world war about like stopping I think what wasn't it, Germany at the time? Yeah, stopping Germany from like becoming a bigger superpower because it was getting money at the time, and then like just completely just destroying everything about them. And it boom, black people thinking that they are Americans because I mean you are living in America, right? You were born here for the most part. We're told they can't because of whatever reasons. Same thing happened in World War II. You were coming back, you were fighting the Nazis, one of the wars that people pine over, and like there's so many movies, video games, and everything else dedicated to it, but nothing brings up the fact that like those black soldiers came back to having a drink out of different water fountains. Boom, CRT. Like that's right there. You understanding the whole scope on that. That's like just a basic understanding that there's more to the story. So when you see these politicians trying to say that, oh, it's making white people feel bad about themselves and yada yada yada, like just crying these crocodile tears. It's like, no, I don't think anybody is teaching it to make you feel bad about yourself. If you feel bad about yourself, or if you feel like somebody's trying to make you feel bad about yourself, that says more about you than it does about them, and that you are that self-important that you think that someone bringing up the whole scope of history is being used. I mean, someone bringing up the whole scope of history is a plot against you is weird. Like, how much of your ego are you currently showing? Like, you are clearly thinking too highly of
yourself. That really like hurts me that somebody would not.
But why are your feelings more important than the reality of the violence of our lives?
It is not about making any group of people feel bad about themselves. If anything, it's making that group of people understand like, oh, okay, I understand the fuller scope of things. I see where we are now. Hopefully we don't ever go, well, not even hopefully. With the information that I know now, I know that we won't go back there because me and with everybody else involved, because we're learning this history, won't ever do it again. But if you are telling people because they're hearing the whole truth that, oh, this is only used to attack you and make you feel bad about yourself, you are basically telling people like, oh, nah, I mean, you know, they did that, but like, I mean, come on, man. You know, it was the times, bro. Like, you know, sometimes lynchings happen. You know, sometimes we just, you know, have sundown towns. You know, sometimes there's just like institutional racism. You know, like sometimes it happens, bro. What do you expect? Come on, what do you expect? Like, I mean, don't be mad at me. It was my ancestors. It's like, bro, Dr. King was assassinated in 1967. That's not that long ago. All of these things that we're talking about, as far as the history that it's to be taught so that we don't repeat it, is not that long ago. It's like when people are talking about Israel Palestine. There's some people who use like the idiotic rhetoric, or just because they don't know any better. They're like, oh yeah, there's a century long fight between them. I mean, it's complicated. Like, no, it's not complicated. Like, Palestine was taken in 1948. Like, it's not complicated. But if you don't know the history, you don't understand where things could be possibly going, right? So that's why so many people try to take you away from learning about the history of things in the full scope. But the people who don't lose out on learning about the history are the people that don't want you to know about it, because they sure as hell know, because they know what's coming next in the sense, like, you can kind of map it out, because humans, I mean, we're cyclical creatures, and we are, from what I'm understanding, and we ain't that much different than back then. Like I said before, the same rhetoric, and as far as racist stuff, and as far as like just the mass hysteria during the Spanish flu was happening during COVID-19 in the 2020s in comparison. You get what I'm saying? So, in 2020. So, like, if you have more people educated and understanding what's going on around them, you will have them understand what to look out for and be able to stop it before it gets wild. For instance, again, just to bring up Israel Palestine, your boy Bibi, I mean, I hope he ain't your boy, but Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu, is like, he brings up the story of Almanac, I believe that's the name, from the Old Testament. That's where God was basically John Wick. But like the Old Testament, the story of Almanac, if I'm not mistaken, tells one of the kings to kill, because God tells one of the kings to kill everybody that is a adversary to the homeland of Israel. And he brings that up in terms of like, that's how he looks at attacking Palestinians. Like,
to remember what Amalek has done to you, says our Holy Bible. And we do remember, and we are fighting our brave troops and combatants who are now in Gaza or around Gaza and in all other regions in Israel are joining this chain of Jewish heroes.
Him and everybody in his cabinet have been saying things that are all genocidal, that are all like ethnic cleansing, like everything that they're saying all fits the mold and play of people who are doing a genocide as they are doing a genocide. And they're just repeating literally what the Nazis did to the Ashkenazi Jews in Germany. Ashkenazi Jews were German Jews, German Jewish people. He's doing the thing that they did because that's the history repeating itself. But if you don't know that, you'll be like, oh nah, it's just a war, October 7th, things been going on, it's crazy out here, we don't know what to do, like, I don't know, they got like...
You're a human being that exists in the world, and you're entitled to your perspectives. But frankly, I think it derails the conversation when we're not talking about whether or not the ICJ, which exists, and which is a part of a body of international law and treaties that we subscribe to and that we are signatories to in the United States of America, and which Israel is a signatory of the Genocide Convention. They have an obligation under the law not to be killing civilians the way that they're doing. And so the question is whether or not those organizations are going to hold them accountable, and whether or not the United States is going to follow its own law, like the lay law, which precludes us from giving money to...
Our obligation is the defense of...
countries that are committing war crimes.
The U.S. government's obligation is to the defense of its citizenry. That's true for Israel as well. And we're not going to international law ourselves into being able to stop terrorist groups that have attacked us.
Wait, what?
Are you talking about? When you're like, oh, they international
He never said
law.
that they can't go into Rafah to remove Hamas. Hamas remains a viable threat to the Israeli people, and the Israelis and the IDF absolutely are going to continue operations against their leadership and their infrastructure.
we gotta sanction them because they're not following rules, and just even the thought of having rules to war is already sickening of itself. But again, the point is, you need to understand the history of things so that you don't repeat it. Because if you don't understand, or if you don't even know, you're doomed to repeat it. That is why they are fighting so hard.
Who was found dead at the weekend, Hind Rajab, and she was in a car with her family. They were fleeing Gaza City, and she was on the phone. She was the last surviving member of her family in the car. She was on the phone to emergency services. The Red Crescent sent an ambulance out to her. At the weekend, that girl was found dead in the car, as were the paramedics. Does that constitute a war crime?
I heard about this tragic case. I don't know what exactly happened there, but we've seen how Hamas take over ambulances. We've seen how they embed themselves in the hospital.
So is it okay to start?
As far as in the States, to roll back things like not teaching, I feel like it's Florida. I'll look it up. I've read about it before, read an article or two, and listened to some stuff about it before, but it's Florida, if I'm not mistaken, because, that's how they operate there. Florida's its own place as is Texas. Wanting to not teach slavery, the enslavement of Africans, it's like, why wouldn't you? That literally plays into the whole framework of North America. That was the booster. As far as if we want to talk about it, and if we go about subjects, as far as math, economically speaking, you should talk about it, because then you can tie in how that free labor was able to play into a lot of businesses booming, a lot of wealth made for a lot of families, where there's a lot of generational wealth made off the back of people for free. If you want to talk about it from a health standpoint, there was a lot of people who were sick, who would lose their lives because they were either sickly, because they wasn't taking them to the doctor for real, or they were born with any kind of mental disability or physical disability or what have you, and they would be unalived because humans, Africans that were enslaved, were property. Like women who had kids during the enslavement of Africans in the States and in Europe and whatnot were property, so you could write them off on taxes. They weren't people. Okay? So not teaching that, not understanding the brutality and the viciousness of that, and then how it plays in the economics and how it plays in the capitalism and all these things, is not being fair to the students for them to understand labor, getting all these, understanding all these things, understanding I see where we were. I don't want to go back there. So let's do our best to be better than what we were. If you are not allowing people to learn history, you want them to be the same forever. And if you want them to be the same forever, then you are the problem. Because the status quo was dangerous to everybody. Really. But just not the people with the money, because they don't care. They out the way. So this month, while we still got a few more days left in it, it don't even matter. Just keep learning. History is the greatest thing to look into, because it's so complex and it's not complicated. It's just, it is what it is, and that it happened, and so you can look back and see why it happened and how we got to where we are. You can look at Israel-Palestine. You can see, during World War I, the Balfour Declaration, when dude was just I think there needs to be a state for Israel, because Jewish people, Ashkenazi Jews in Germany or whatnot, and then Europe period, was just getting side-eyed a lot, because they had to find a reason, as far as the Europeans, and that had to find a reason, had to find a culprit for whatever ails the community. It happens in all communities. It happens you could look at that with how the people that are trying to migrate here, the same thing. You blame them for everything. You blaming them for everything. You paint them into a corner. As far as with Ashkenazi Jews in Germany, you painted them into a corner, but were literally putting people into ovens and concentration camps. And then you look at 1948 when Zionists took over Palestine, and then after in 1967 or whatever, after the 6-Day War, and then after like the Arab-Israeli War and whatnot, then you have people living in open air concentration camps in Gaza and all of these other places that resemble what in history? Concentration camps, because it's all happening again. We are just able to live it now, but it's not that long ago. A thing that you need to realize is the people with the power don't want you to look into the past, because if you look into the past, you will have a better future. That's just how it's going to work. That's why during Black History Month, they tend to only show you pictures of Dr. King in black and white. There were literal pictures of this man in color, because color pictures existed. Like, there's interviews of him in color.
Van Oker, roll 20, sound 36. Sandy.
Dr. King.
They existed. It was only the 60s. It wasn't like he was doing this in the 20s. You know what I'm saying? But if you think it's so far, like so long ago, you're like, oh man, that's so long ago. Like, dang, I mean, look where we at now. But then if you look where we at now, not much has changed that much. You look at as far as enslavement of Africans in this country. You look at plantations. You had African people on plantations. Then after the Emancipation Proclamation and people were finally, out of bondage, then you had peonage, which peonage was basically you working for a former slaver on like you basically was working off a debt for them. So you had to do whatever. Like they found some trumped up charges to put you in debt. You had to work your debt off for them. And then after that, then you had like the black codes and all that happening during the Reconstruction era. Then you had prison. 13th Amendment, yeah, it's about stopping the enslavement of people unless they're in prison. You know what I'm saying? And if you look up the other amendments after, so it's a thing of just understanding history. If you understand the history, it's not hard. If you understand the history, you look at it objectively, you'll realize like, oh, they're just doing the things that they were doing before. And now they're doing them in my face. Like, they're just doing it again, though. And why are they doing it again? Because they do their best to make sure you don't know that they did it before.
There's powerful niggardry at work here.
So make sure you do rag cape, stay roll. All right, peace.